project.
Okay, just give me 1 minute to share my screen. Slideshow. Okay, there we go. Can everyone see that? Yes?
Yep, all good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I begin with a position statement. I do not speak for Inuit, nor do I speak for the Inuit Circumpolar Council. This presentation is from my limited perspective as the archivist of ICC. I am not Inuit. I have a fantastic job. I am honored to care for and facilitate access to the collections of one of the oldest and most influential international Indigenous Peoples Organizations. This is the QR code and the link to our database. I'm always leery at putting it at the front because everybody will just go play with the database, but I'm okay with that because it's a cool database, if I do say so myself. While ICC has been around for decades, the ICC Canada Archives is relatively new, and it consists of 3 quite distinct collections. The archive, so unique records, a fine art and cultural artifact collection, and a library. This is a practice-based presentation, highlights of what ICC Canada did and what we continue to do to make our collections accessible to our users. Nothing we've done is unheard of. Many individuals have argued for decades for more appropriate subject headings, for more inclusive archival description standards, et cetera, et cetera. We draw and we drew and we continue to draw inspiration from several Indigenous archives and libraries in the Arctic who are doing the same kind of work that we are. So ICC Canada is a nonprofit organization dedicated to representing the interests of Inuit in Canada on matters of international importance. We bring local and regional concerns on transnational subjects like climate change and marine pollution to international forums where high-level decisions are made on issues that impact the Inuit homeland. We promote, advocate, and celebrate the totality of Inuit culture. ICC Canada is led by a board of directors comprising the elected leaders of the 4 Inuit land claims settlement regions in Canada. Past leaders of ICC Canada include environmental activist Sheila Watt-Kluche and Canada's current Governor General, Mary Simon. ICC Canada is one of the 4 regional offices of the International Inuit Circumpolar Council. ICC preserves and promotes the unity of Inuit as a single people within the Circumpolar Arctic and advocates on behalf of all Inuit, regardless of nation-state borders. ICC was founded in 1977 when Inupiaq leader Evan Hobson Sr. invited other Inuit leaders to discuss how to provide united and consistent responses to, at then, new threats and increasing attacks on the Inuit way of life. Just a reminder, that's Inuit you're not. ICC is now a major international Indigenous Peoples Organization. We are a founding member of the Arctic Council, and we are a permanent participant on it. We hold consultative status at the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and as of July, we are the only Indigenous Peoples Organization to ever hold consultative status at the UN's International Maritime Organization, to name just a few of our high-level undertakings. ICC holds a General Assembly every 4 years, at which delegates from across the circumpolar region elect a new chair and executive council members. It's a celebration of Inuit culture. We develop policies and adopt resolutions that will guide the activities of the organization for the coming 4-year term. Every 4 years, the position of chair, the international leader, rotates from one region to the next. Currently, Kilalik Nunaat holds the chairship and Sarah Olsvig is the ICC chair. In July 2026, ICC Canada is very excited to host our 15th General Assembly in Iqaluit, at which point the international chairship will also pass to us. So in July 2022, the ICC Canada Archives was created to preserve and promote the organization's records, which document Inuit knowledge, participation, advocacy, and leadership. ICC Canada's history is part of Inuit history. We are a private repository. As that overview has hopefully shown, ICC is an Inuit organization, but it's an organization that operates in a nation-state-based international system. Each of its 4 regional offices operate inside nation states with complex historical and, in all cases, ongoing colonial systems. Our collections reflect this. So the ICC Canada Archives are not an Inuit archive, but they are an archive for Inuit. Many records, reports, books, etc. that we hold are the same kind as found in honestly any nonprofit organization, while other types of documentary resources are quite they're unique to Inuit organizations. So, not coincidentally, I started at ICC Canada in July 2022. I was hired to build an archive from scratch, or as I describe it, turn chaos into order. And that was honestly my job. I am the first archives and library professional in any ICC office in our nearly 50-year history. The Archives and Data Management Department of ICC consists of 3 people, including myself, all of whom are based at ICC Canada, 2 archivists and an information management specialist. Our repository is small, though steadily, unfortunately, growing. We hold all of ICC Canada's records and a good amount of records from ICC internationally, mainly from when Canada has held the international chairship. While we are an institutional archive, we do accept donations of materials from the private sector and individuals in some cases. We actually just got a donation of thousands of photographs and some excellent older rare books for the library. So our collections philosophy is simple: meet our users where they are. We assume nothing from our users except curiosity. Everything that we do is about access to information. And this philosophy of meet our users where they are underlies all major decisions we've made and decisions we continue to make. Archives and libraries, access to information is necessary for sovereignty, for decolonization, for truth and reconciliation, and for healing. However, libraries and archives are often very uncomfortable spaces for Inuit in Canada. They hold items that document historical violence and ongoing damage and trauma. Most records held in archives relating to Inuit were created about Inuit for non-Inuit purposes, often without consent, and by non-Inuit individuals and organizations. Access to desired information can be extremely difficult due to active and passive barriers, including what we as information professionals would see as just really common information management practices. But they are barriers. The fact that there are not many Inuit professional archivists nor librarians in Canada shouldn't really come as a surprise. In ICC Canada Archives, our records and collections are created and curated by Inuit, an Inuit organization on behalf of Inuit, and of course with consent and for Inuit priorities. Our newly established repository faces some challenges to find ways of making documentary heritage accessible, relevant, and culturally appropriate for our Inuit users. There are ways that libraries and archival repositories can work within existing structures and professional standards to make our practices less Eurocentric or colonial and more welcoming to Inuit users and especially Inuit ways of knowing. While the ICC Canada Archives is located in Ottawa, Ontario, the majority of our users are in the Arctic, in Inuit Nuuk. We do interlibrary loans for library materials, and we provide access to archival and fine art collections through an online web portal. This is not perfect by any means. It overcomes the barrier of distance for many, but it still presents significant access issues for users with unreliable internet and those with less digital literacy. We welcome in-person users in the archive. However, non-Inuit individuals must apply to visit the archives. And our consulting space and how we run is very informal. So this slide and the next slide show how we created the web portal. The ICC Canada Archives web portal was designed, created, and launched to the public in only 10 months between March and December of 2023. There was a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. The web portal consists of a searchable database of all of our collections and a variety of interpretive resources or like outreach features. The database is by no means complete. Less than 10% of our archival holdings have been processed and described, but there's still a good amount of archival content. On the library side, the library is fully cataloged and online, and our fine art collection is also fully described, and most of it is online. I just need to review the last few descriptions before the rest of it can go up. There are new additions to the archives collection every week, with significant record groups added roughly every 2 months. An important reminder that an online database does not mean the records themselves are necessarily online. We are digitizing thousands of archival records in various media, but the vast majority of records will not be online for a variety of reasons. So the ICC Canada Archives are for Inuit. It was a given that all aspects of the archives web portal must be available and must be fully functional in Inuktitut. And Inuktitut uses a non-Latin script called syllabic. The primary requirement for our online archives database, therefore, was the ability to index, search, and display English and Inuktitut. These language requirements shaped major decisions, the biggest of which is what content management systems we could use. In library, everybody uses ILS, Integrated Library System. In archives, it's CMS, Content Management System. No ILS on the market does what we needed it to do, essentially. Unless we were willing to pay quite seriously hundreds of thousands of dollars, which we're an Indigenous NGO. We don't have that money. We worked with And or Not, which is a Vancouver-based group, and they're absolutely fantastic. And they were thrilled to embrace the challenge of designing a public interface for content management systems that works in English and Inuktitut. Our collections database is actually one of the only cultural heritage databases that is fully functional and available in an Indigenous language in Canada. Hand in hand with language was the imperative of federated searching. Remember, we're meeting users where they are. So for searching, that means Google. Our search function needed to be as intuitive and as easy to use as Google, without, of course, the ads. ANDI, A-N-D-I, which is our discovery interface. It's And or Not's proprietary discovery interface that they've customized for us. ANDI searches the contents of all descriptions, as well as inside digitized records, providing their OCR, all from one box on the main portal webpage. We customized our ANDI interface with a focus on user convenience, including features such as collections and permalink, allowing users to save and share material that they are interested in. There's a feedback button on every single catalog record, making it easy to contact the archive staff about specific items of interest, including interlibrary loans, or to provide us with information or correct any errors. Andy also answered our need for a web portal that functions equally well on mobile devices as well as computers. A robust browse feature was also an imperative. Again, we expect nothing of our users except curiosity. Andy supports research-driven users, and it also supports sophisticated research querying. But it's not designed for that. That's just a happy accident that it can do that. Our portal is designed for a curiosity-driven user. So the ability to browse the collections in multiple ways is really key. And one type of browsing is by taxonomy. Our 3 taxonomies run across all 3 of our collections. So we have a name taxonomy, subject heading taxonomy, and a place taxonomy. And that's with the browse name, browse subjects, browse place. You can browse, but you can also search within each of these taxonomies as well. So a key practice for enabling access is the use of access points. Sorry, I'll go back to the slide. Is the use of access points. Every single database record has at least one access point in addition to its author or its archival creator. And again, these are the same across all the collections. So subject headings are required in library catalogs. Obviously, they're standard. But subject headings are very rare in archival catalogs and archival databases. And it's honestly about 50-50 in terms of fine art catalogs. So we've created our own taxonomies, all 3 of them, because standard ones are racist, they use outdated or racist language, or they're just irrelevant to our collections and our Inuit users. Obviously, given the name of the presentation, we're going to focus on subject headings. We started with Library of Congress subject headings, mixed in with some plain language ones, and edits of the obviously problematic Library of Congress subject headings. Starting an archive from scratch, literally single-handedly, was just a lot. And devising a unique subject taxonomy was just absolutely too much for me while we were cataloging and doing archival descriptions from scratch. In terms of the library, we prioritized a classification scheme before subject heading taxonomy. Like subject heading taxonomies, classification schemes are not necessarily appropriate for Indigenous collections. We made our own based on the Brian Deere classification system. This was definitely the right order of work for us because doing the classification scheme actually helped conceptualize a lot of the subject taxonomy work. Also, we had to have a lot of material cataloged and described before we could tackle subject heading revision. You can't create a taxonomy until you know what you have and what your materials are actually about. So our access points don't work the way a subject heading works in a library catalog. They work like tags on a social media platform. This is because we're meeting users where they are. The record, art piece, or library resource is not necessarily about a subject or a person. Records get tagged if they would be relevant to a user who is interested in such a subject or such an individual or organization or person. Another reason for conceptualizing access points as tags is that our taxonomies unify our 3 collections. So name access and subject keyword access are the only 2 metadata fields that are in all 3 collection catalogs. Our 3 collections require quite different metadata schemes to make them accessible and to make them in line with professional practice. Subject headings used in a traditional library way are just far too precise for archival records and fine art pieces. So since I started the archives, I knew we would have to revise our subject heading taxonomy in a fairly major way. Our criteria first and foremost, this is from an Inuit point of view. Library of Congress subject headings infamously are from a white Christian male perspective. That's why you have a subject heading for women astronauts, but not for men astronauts. Inuit are not the exception in our taxonomy. Everyone else is the exception. So health obviously means health of Inuit. So there's no need for the Inuit before health, as you would in the Library of Congress. Next criteria was the headings have to work in English and Inuktitut. They have to be translatable. Inuktitut is a complex language and works nothing like English or any Romance language. There's a lot more words in English. Inuktitut is very compact. Nuances in English just don't exist in the same way in Inuktitut. Third criteria was it had to be intuitive for our average user. Plain language is key without detracting from the subject heading's meaning. Again, we're meeting users where they are, and climatic changes is like, I can't handle it. It makes me so angry every time I see it in a library catalog. Like, it's climate change. Fourth, there has to be a mix of specific and general, so the taxonomy is appropriate for all three of our collections. Obviously, we have to use Inuit place name. And finally, there has to be internal consistency with simple creation and construction rules for the subject headings. This last criterion is the only one that's not, obviously relevant to users. That's just me, because remember, my job, turn chaos into order. Archivists like tidying things. So this is the project process. Number one, first, much of the scholarly literature about decolonizing Library of Congress subject headings, or just subject headings in general, come from academic libraries. Academic libraries are obviously attempting to reconcile mainstream practices, whether at Library of Congress subject headings or another national standard, while still working within that, structure. We don't have any of those constraints. We do what we want to do. Library of Congress subject heading taxonomy is the English world standard. And so we did model our subject heading taxonomy after it, aligning us with modern research institutions. But what we've done is sort of marry a Library of Congress subject heading approach with Inuit perspectives. We're trying to do a best of both worlds approach. So the first step is we exported all of our current subject headings into a giant Excel spreadsheet from all three of the databases. We then established really broad, high-level taxonomic groups. And the colors on this little snippet each correlate with one of those first order groups. And not surprisingly, we call this the rainbow sheet. Next, we did a lot of research into Indigenous subject heading projects. These are just 4 of the highlights. First Nations House of Learning is affiliated with UBC, the University of British Columbia. And it's currently in development, but they've already set their standard sort of order for a subject heading, and it's topic, subtopic, place, chronology. That's just, again, these are just the 4 that we found most helpful. There's dozens of Indigenous subject heading projects going on around the world, actually. Step 4 was make the obvious and easy changes. For example, climatic changes, climate change, and changing Greenland to Kalalit Nunaat. There was a lot of actually obvious changes that we could do. 5 was set some construction rules. So these are our rules: subject area, people, if not Inuit, and then geographic subdivision. And then chronology, but we rarely have chronology, so we didn't, it's last. We do follow Library of Congress practice with the dashes to denote subdivisions. A big reason for this is a double dash like that actually works in Inuktitut. It doesn't replicate any Inuktitut punctuation. Sixth, we did just a lot of staff consultation, like just a lot. Our staff, our colleagues are our users, and they are subject specialists, and they were absolutely key to getting a taxonomy that works. We're at step 7 now, implementing revisions across all 3 of the collections in English. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 follow. One reason why user feedback, like broad user feedback, is actually late in this process is there's a few reasons for that. One of it is just our schedule, is just the ICC schedule of events. Another reason is the fact that taxonomies are really weird and they're abstract and they're just like, they don't make any sense to non-librarians. Like, this is a really library nerd niche thing. It's super important, but it's pretty niche. We cannot show up empty-handed. We need a lot of real data for users to actually test this on and use it with. This is an example of just work in progress. Our database is a bit of a hot mess right now. It's actually a big hot mess in terms of subject access, because again, this is an ongoing process. So in that first example, the book, you can tell that first subject heading, Inuit -- Canada, this was just 100% copy cataloging from an existing record. So let's look at a couple examples. So contaminants instead of persistent pollutants, and most pollution. A reminder that pollution is not, a lot of pollution is actually not generated in the Arctic. Most pollution that makes it to the Arctic is generated in the south. And contaminant is the term that Inuit use for all persistent pollutants, and most pollutants, and even most sources of pollution. If you translate persistent pollutants into Inuktitut, it translates to contaminants. We have replaced a lot of, I'd like to say, ambiguities with more direct. So that's the government relations category. It's government relations -- region or people / nation state, to make it very clear what type of government relations we're talking about. We don't use land tenure, which is really common in the Library of Congress subject headings, and we don't use land tenure ever. It's been replaced with several, actually, subject headings to convey the legal heft behind the word, but without using obscure language. Health and wellness is, I think, one of our best changes. Health and wellness reflects the Inuit holistic conceptions of being healthy and health. Some more examples. This is another really important one. Management of ... instead of conservation of or protection of. This is really, really frequent in Library of Congress subject headings. And this is not Inuit. Management of is reflective of what stewarding Inuit lands, waters, and wildlife actually means. Social life and customs is just terrible on quite a few levels, and we've replaced it with everyday life. Not only is that plain language, and like, you know, it's really obvious and easy to understand, but it removes the colonial and that sort of socio-anthropological perspective of observing Inuit customs, definitely in air quotes. Again, it's internally consistent. There's no commas, there's no inverted word orders. We use Northern Canada rather than Canada, comma Northern. We only use Indigenous peoples if we're talking about more than one people. Otherwise, just use the name of the people. Again, we're meeting users where they are. And I think I'm going to stop there. I just need to figure out how to unshare. Okay, there we go.
Thanks, Lisa. This is Sandy. That sounds like a really overwhelming project that you've undertaken, but obviously you've made some inroads into it at least. So I guess the question would be, is your revised taxonomy available for other people to use at this point?
At this point, no. It will be though once we're done.
Okay.
But that depends on, and like we won't make it available until we have it fully translated as well. Like we're translating sort of as we go. I'm by no means fluent in not even a little bit way can I speak or read Inuit, but I read enough of it and I use enough of it in the database that I can do really basic translations and they're correct. But for some of the more involved sections of like some of the huge like high level taxonomic categories, like wildlife and environment, it's so technical in English and in Inuit that I can't do that. So we have to send it out for translation. So we won't make anything public until we've got everything in English and Inuit.
That's great.
We're hoping by the end of the year. Like we're hoping by the end of December we'll have the classification scheme available for the public, as well as the subject heading taxonomy, as well as very short explanations, sort of like a mini academic paper of why we did what we did.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Are there other questions for Lisa?
Lisa.
Thanks, Rachel.
Question. Did I hear that you said you use the Brian Deere classification as a basis for your start?
Yep. For our classification system, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's important.
It's and like the great thing about Brian Deere is it's a concept more than a strict system. And so it's very ICC, like it's very our library, and that's the whole point of a Brian Deere collection. Is it's meant to be for small focused collections. So every Brian Deere system is unique. So what the Weewa library uses at UBC is a Brian Deere system, but it looks nothing like what the Musqueam First Nations library looks like, or looks like nothing like ours, because they're meant to be unique to the collection.
Great, thank you.
So I didn't catch or miss how you engaged Inuit people in your process. And I'm wondering if you can, like, were there specific groups that you went to for feedback, or do you have Inuit people working in your staff or like an elders circle or anything like that for consultation?
So we are an Inuit organization. The majority of my colleagues are Inuk. I am one of the few, only because there aren't enough Inuk librarians and archivists in Canada who are not Inuk. So when we trial everything we've done in the archives at ICC events when we've got a massive amount of people around us who are Inuit. So we gather feedback on pretty much everything that way. again, this is very, 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 very specialized. There are no public libraries in Nunavik. Nunavik is the second largest Inuit region in Canada, both population and land-wise, and there are no public libraries. This is very niche. There's a huge appetite for access to Inuit history by Inuit. Like it's massive. Everywhere we go, people are thrilled. Like when we do user testing, when we have a booth set up an event, like we have people sitting in our chairs with us for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. Because they've never been able to access their own history this way, because so much of it is in non-Inuit institutions in the South. So it's very, our consultation is in a way permanent because we are an Inuit organization, and again, most of the people I work with are Inuit. And then it's also at the same time very ad hoc, because it's whenever we're hosting an event or at an event, the archive, we always have a station set up. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. In that consultation, this is kind of a little bit to the side. In that consultation, do you find that there are sort of discrepancies, disagreements among what you might call the Ottawa Inuit and folks who are on the land?
Urban Inuit? No, not at all.
No?
No, not at all. The biggest like points of contention are translations. Is how terms are translated. Inuktitut is not standardized.
Mm-hmm.
Like French is standardized, English is standardized, aside from the American randomness. Like Inuktitut is not. There are at least 3 perfectly valid ways in the same dialect of translating the months of the year. It's not, so that's the biggest, it's very lighthearted disagreement, but like that's the biggest point of disagreement always, is how we've rendered concepts into Inuktitut, or how we've rendered words, specific words into Inuktitut.
Right. Are there any other questions?
When you've done your consultation, have you done it with lots of terms, or do you come up with the term and then add it to a department meeting? Or how do you, like, to begin with, you would have had big discussions.
Yes.
But now as they're coming up, how do you proceed? So
we started with about 1,500 unique subject headings, and we're in English. We're now down to under 650. And so we started with just kind of the really, really big overarching questions, like how do we construct this? Like how do we construct a subject heading? What makes the most sense? And once we got kind of all staff and our executive on board with that, we then broke it down into departments, or we call them teams. So the wildlife and environment team spent hours with us looking specifically at all the wildlife and environment headings. Same with health and wellness. Our health and wellness team spent hours looking at just the health and wellness, because like I'm not a subject matter expert, nor am I Inuk. That's 2 strikes against me. And our information management specialist, who did the majority of the nitty-gritty work on this, is not Inuk. Nor is she a subject matter specialist. So we approached a team sort of that way. The big decisions, like I knew just from our collections, and like I knew that it was obviously from an Inuit point of view. So the word Inuit was actually going to appear very infrequently in this taxonomy because it's implied, it's obvious. And obviously Inuit place names were given, like, you know, sort of those really big, easy things were established from the get-go. But the nitty-gritty was absolutely devised by the teams. and we're going to, ICC is hosting a women's summit in Sisimiut at the end of October. And I'm hoping that, I'm not going, but I'm hoping that one of the staff members who are going will be comfortable doing a demonstration of the database, and specifically looking at subject headings dealing with specifically not just women's issues, but a lot of the health and wellness. Our team said we need some more, and they're all Inuk on our health and wellness team, but they said we need some more voices in this. So we're hoping that they can fine tune a few of those. I will say our health and wellness team, one of our staff members, she was so enthusiastic about this project. Like she was just like, how am I not a librarian? We're like, Melinda, you're a nurse. That is like way like a different level than like what I do. But like she was just so into it and just loved it. So, and Melinda is going to Sisimiut. So yeah, we're hoping to get more of that specialized feedback.
It sounds like your entire organization is involved. It sounds wonderful. Everyone must be so invested in this classification scheme. You're gonna have to give it a name or something.
when you're revising something, like it's for our staff who are in it, you know, they use libraries all the time for research. Like we write high-level policy documents. This is what they do, and so they absolutely know how to operate and how to use, you know, a university library or a public library. And it's always against them in implicit ways. It's never for Inuit. It's never about Inuit. They're always the exception. So the chance to actually make something that all of our staff are so familiar with, because you know this is how you research. Everybody was like really on side, and like yes, there was a whole lot of wow, you guys are super nerds down there, which you know we take with pride. But by the end of it, the vast majority of staff were exceptionally into this, and which was wonderful. But it shows that there's so much appetite for decolonizing, for lack of a better word. It's not a perfect word, but it is what it is. There's so much appetite for decolonizing and for making access to information more Inuk. And you know, capacity is just such a massive issue. I only have my job because there are 2 professional Inuk archivists in Canada. That's the only reason why I have my job. And my goal is to work myself out of a job. So we get an Inuk archivist who is professionally trained, who can come in to ICC.
So I guess that sort of in the grand scheme of things, I'm wondering if there's potential, once you've got this all figured out, to step this out to other Inuit organizations. And I'm thinking here, Sharon Farnell, about the Digital Library North with the Inuvialuit, and if there's like potential for incorporating this sort of thing into their operation.
Oh, there's definitely potential for that. It's again though, it's very we have to, so the Inuvialuit Digital Library is fantastic. We've taken a lot of our subject headings from them, I will say. But we also, our collection is international Inuit. It's circumpolar in scope. So a lot of what we've done, we would not make the same decisions if our collection were just for Inuit in Inuvialuit Nunangat or in Nunatsiavut. Our collections are for all Inuit. So what we've done isn't necessarily like a copy and paste for a lot of the regional organizations. That being said, though, a huge point of the archives database is to serve as proof of concept for Inuit documentary heritage projects. You can get a library catalog that has a display in Inuit. It is absolutely technically possible. You can process archives following Canadian professional standards and descriptive standards for Inuit records in Inuit. It works. It absolutely works. And what's great is 2 of the land claim organizations have already committed to establishing their own archives and absolutely modeled off of our database and what we've done, which is amazing. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. And again, there's such an appetite for access to Inuit history that a lot of the regions were just waiting for one of the other regions to do it so they could see how they could do it. And we just sort of got there first by an excess, for the first time in the history of the universe. We had an excess of funding from Canadian Heritage. And back in 2022, which is why this started.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Lisa, and we are very interested to know about the further development of your project. So please keep us